Good to see all of you here. Appreciate the opportunity to be gathered together again this week on this Thursday as we continue our way through this semester of the Gus Nichols School of Biblical Studies. We have a really good number this Thursday night. You know, sometimes as the semester goes on, it can be tempting to not be here, have other things to do, but the numbers this year and last year alike holding strong even towards the end of the semester, and that's good to see. And grateful that you can be here a couple weeks before Thanksgiving, of course. We'll have Thanksgiving break 2 weeks from tonight, but we'll be back next week, of course. And you better, if you've not gotten your overcoat out of the attic, you better get it. I saw one forecast for 28 next Thursday night, so getting pretty cold next week finally. So that's a station out of Huntsville at least is saying that. So maybe, we'll see. Be ready for it. Be here. It's warm in the building. That's what matters. And we drive here in warm vehicles, and we go to our warm houses, unlike some people in the world. So we are truly, truly blessed. All right, you ready for it? The weekly contribution. We need to take a break. We need to walk a minute before we get into this, and we need to think about it a minute. 2 stories before we get into our study. One on the lighter side, the other one not so much. The first one, how to scare a ghost. A preacher was offered a tidy sum to stay all night in a supposedly haunted house. The preacher, willing to prove the nonsense of spooks, complied. The next morning, when asked what happened, he said, "Well, I went inside, locked the doors, and sat down. Suddenly, there were 3 ghosts in front of me. So I said a prayer, and they were still there. I read a comforting passage from the Bible. They were still there. I sang a hymn. They stayed. Then I told them we would take up a collection, and they all left." So that's kind of on the lighter side, but here's one that maybe you've heard. It's made its rounds. It's written by a lady does not say her church affiliation, but you'll hear the word pastor, so likely denominational in some way, but there's still a point to the lesson, and maybe you've heard it. So written by a lady named Edie Ogan. I'll never forget Easter 1946. I was 14. My little sister O.C., if I'm pronouncing that correctly, O-C-Y, was 12. And my older sister Darlene, 16. We lived at home with our mother, and the 4 of us knew what it was to do without many things. My dad had died 5 years before, leaving Mom and 7 school kids to raise and no money. By 1946, my older sisters were married and my brothers had left home. A month before Easter, the pastor of our church announced that a special Easter offering would be taken to help a poor family. He asked everyone to save and to give sacrificially. When we got home, we talked about what we could do. We decided to buy 50 pounds of potatoes and live on them for a month. This would allow us to save $20 of our grocery money for the offering. When we thought that if we kept our electric lights turned out as much as possible and didn't listen to the radio, we'd save money on that month's electric bill. Darlene got as many house and yard cleaning jobs as possible, and both of us babysat for everyone we could. For 15 cents, we could buy enough cotton loops to make 3 pot holders to sell for $1. We made $20 on pot holders. That month was one of the best of our lives. Every day we counted the money to see how much money we had saved. At night, we'd sit in the dark and talk about how the poor family was going to enjoy having the money that church would give them. We had about 80 people in church, so figure that whatever amount of money we had to give, the offering would surely be 20 times that much. After all, every Sunday, the pastor had reminded everyone to save for this sacrificial offering. The day before Easter, O.C. and I walked to the grocery store and got the manager to give us 3 crisp $20 bills and 1 $10 bill for our change. We ran all the way home to show Mom and Darlene. We'd never had so much money before. That night we were so excited we could hardly sleep. We didn't care that we wouldn't have new clothes for Easter. We had $70 for this sacrificial offering. We could hardly wait to get to church. On Sunday morning, rain was pouring, but we didn't own an umbrella, and the church is over a mile from our home, but it did not seem to matter how wet we got. Darlene even had cardboard in her shoes to fill the holes. The cardboard came apart, and her feet got wet. But we sat in church proudly. I heard some teenagers talking about the Smith girls having on their old dresses. I looked at them in their new clothes, and I felt rich. When the sacrificial offering was taken, we were sitting on the second row from the front. Mom put in the $10 bill, and each of us kids put in a $20 bill. We walked home from church, so speed it up just a little bit, but we walked home from church. We were happy, we were singing, and we got home. We had boiled eggs that Mom had bought us as a special treat with our potatoes. Late that afternoon, the minister drove up in his car. Mom went to the door, talked with him for a moment, and then came back with an envelope in her hand. We asked what it was, but she did not say a word. She opened the envelope, and out fell a bunch of money. There were 3 crisp $20 bills, 1 $10 bill, and 17 $1 bills. We put the money back in the envelope. We did not talk. We just sat there and stared at the floor. We had gone feeling like millionaires to poor white trash. She goes on to tell about more of home life and how the next few days was very difficult. She thought about dropping out of school to earn money. She said, we never realized we were poor. We never thought we were poor. We never knew we were poor. But the following weeks, on a Sunday, there was a missionary who came. There was a missionary who came, and the minister asked, can we all help? The missionary asked for $100 to put a roof on a church building in Africa. The minister said, can't we all sacrifice to help these poor people? We looked at each other and smiled for the first time. We gave the $87 that was given to us, and there was just a little over 100 taken up from the congregation. So that'll hit home, won't it? That'll hit home. It surely will. The Lord has blessed us richly, and we have a responsibility to do good with it. Okay, into our lesson, the weekly contribution. God's designed to support the financial needs of the church. Is money misused? Absolutely. Is money misused in the church? Certainly. The preachers sometimes have the wrong attitude towards it. You better believe it. But at the end of the day, we must remember that this is a command from God, just the same as the other commands from God. And we're just seeking to please Him and to glorify Him in these ways, just the same as we would in any other way. So in Exodus chapter 36, beginning in verse 3, this is going back to when they were receiving what was needed in the offerings from the children of Israel. We see they received from Moses all the offerings which the children of Israel had brought for the work of the service of making the sanctuary. So they continued bringing to him the freewill offerings every morning. Then all the craftsmen who were doing all the work of the sanctuary came, each from the work he was doing. And they spoke to Moses, saying, the people bring much more than enough for the service of the work which the Lord had commanded us to do. So Moses gave a commandment, and they caused it to be proclaimed throughout the camp, saying, let neither man nor woman do any more work for the offering of the sanctuary. And the people were restrained from bringing, for the material they had was sufficient for all the work to be done, indeed too much. Would that not be a nice problem to have? Both in what members give, but then also how congregations use it, that we say we don't know what else to do with it. Everything belongs to God. This is the most important fact to remember when it comes to giving. When we realize that everything we have, including our money, is not ours, then it becomes easier to give. What if I were to say returning rather than giving? Would that help us to have a better understanding of the collection on Sunday? We as Christians should find joy in giving to God. God expects Christians to give to the work of the church, which includes edifying the saints and saving lost souls. So let's study this lesson together. First of all, we need to be reminded that God owns it all. I can tell you how much you have in your bank account right now. It's zero. It's the same amount that I have in mine. That belongs to me, that I own. Now, God has given me some of His goods to care for and use in a right way in my lifetime. But at the end of the day, it all belongs to God. And I need to make sure that I'm using it in the right way. Yes, we can use it for our own needs and even our own desires and enjoy what we do with it, as long as it's not sinful, of course. But ultimately, God expects us to be faithful with it. God owns everything. In Job chapter 41 and verse 11, who has preceded me that I should pay him? Everything under heaven is mine. God owns it all. Psalm chapter 24 and verse 1, the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 2. This verse has stood out to me for a long time. I think I have a note in my Bible in James 2 directing me to Proverbs 22 too, about how when we sometimes do not treat the poor in the way we should. Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 2, the rich and the poor have this in common: the Lord is the maker of them all. And the Lord is the maker of all of us. Too often this is forgotten. If you've not preached or taught a lesson from Deuteronomy chapter 8 lately, let me encourage you to do so. Look at this text once again. Notice this, when you study the kings and the prophets, every bit of that goes back to the law. There's so much similarities in the kings and the prophets where they're just reminding them what the law said. Micah chapter 6 and verse 8, for example, to do justly, walk humbly, and so forth. That was first said in the law. And so God is always fair, right? And God is telling them, if you do what is right, I'll continue to bless you. But if you don't, I won't. Notice this, Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 7. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and springs that flow out of valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron and out of whose hills you can dig copper. When you have eaten and are full, then you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. It all comes from God. But notice verse 11. I put it in bold for you. Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments. But they forget him, don't they? They forget him. And they forget him quite often. If we're not careful, we'll do the same. We'll forget God. His judgments and his statutes, which I command you today, lest when you have eaten and are full and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them, when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, when your heart is lifted up and you forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, then it shall be, if you by any means forget the Lord your God and follow other gods and serve them and worship them, I testify against you this day that you shall surely perish. God's saying, look, I'm going to give you all of this great land and all of these great things. And as long as you continue to serve me and follow me, I'll keep blessing you. But if you quit doing that, I will quit blessing you. And again, that's the rest of the story that Roy's telling us about in these biblical periods of history. And how sad it is that you see people doing that still today. We all know this parable in Luke chapter 12 and verse 16. Jesus spoke a parable to them saying, the ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself saying, what shall I do since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and all my goods. Notice the my, I and my. Circle those as you read this text. I will say to my soul, so you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. You can have it all. You can be the wealthiest person in Jasper, Alabama, or the state, or the country, or the world. And then you take that last breath and you're on the same ground as all other people. That eternal soul. Notice some of the biblical history of giving. The patriarchal period, Genesis chapter 14, beginning in verse 18, we find Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God, and he blessed him and said, blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand, and he gave him a tithe of all. Abraham giving a tithe to Melchizedek. Genesis chapter 28, verse 22, and this stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that you give me I will surely give a tenth to you. So you see in the patriarchal period, this tithe of this tenth. This Mosaical period of time, a tenth to the Levites. Numbers chapter 18 and verse 24. For the tithes of the children of Israel, which they offer up as a heave offering to the Lord, I have given to the Levites as an inheritance. Number 2, a tenth for the feast. Deuteronomy chapter 14 and verse 22, you shall surely tithe all the increase of your grain that the field produces year by year. Number 3, the corners of the field. Leviticus chapter 19, verses 9 and 10. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. The book of Ruth comes to mind in this, does it not? And you shall not glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather every grape of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. Now, my wife and children, we live in a residential area, and we have a little raised bed in the backyard. It's enjoyable, and we enjoy eating, but it's nothing like what Vance grows and Levi grows and some of you others, what you would grow. But even at that, we're not used to this necessarily being our only income, of course. But so I try to always say, well, how can I apply this to myself? How can I understand this myself with leaving the corners? So I picture if I'm shopping at the grocery store and I fill the large part of the basket with my goods, and I fill the smaller part with goods to purchase and give someone else. I know that might not be an exact, but that's how I get an understanding of this, of leaving a little extra for someone else. They were also to give every firstborn animal, Exodus chapter 13, verses 11 and 12. And it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, and he swore to you and your fathers, and he gives it to you, that you shall set apart to the Lord all that open the womb, that is, every firstborn that comes from an animal which you have. Then there was also the free will offering, Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 10. Then you shall keep the Feast of Weeks to the Lord your God with the tribute of a free will offering from your hand. All in all, their offering is estimated to be closer to a third. A lot of times we'll say, well, that tithing, that giving of the 10%, that's Old Testament, that's not New Testament. In actuality, theirs was upwards to a third of their yearly income. A couple of works that I'd highly recommend on this. Many of you, of course, knew V.P. Black and knew him better than I did. I only was able to meet him a couple of times, but if you can ever find any of his works on giving, I would highly recommend getting it. The little booklets that were out, My God and My Money and Rust as a Witness. There were floating around still VHS tapes of him lecturing on this, and maybe DVDs. That'd be a little challenging to find, but Kyle Butt with Apologetics Press, through World Video Bible School, I believe, produced kind of a spin-off of that, if you will, My God and His Money. And it gives credit to Brother Black and all the work that he did. And that's easy to find through World Video Bible School website. And I'd highly recommend watching it, maybe even watching it with your members. It's some good stuff about giving. But, Brother Black, he said in his survey and going from congregation to congregation, he found that the average church member gave about 3%. About 3%. Interestingly enough, a few years ago I was teaching a young adults class, and I wanted a section on giving, and I asked one of our deacons who's done pretty well for himself, and he's kind of a financial advisor, and I asked him to teach a series of lessons on the Bible and giving and how to wisely use your money. We need to be teaching our young people how to use money in a godly way. That definitely needs to be Bible classes. It's a biblical topic. And he started out by asking what's the average that people give. And he was going across the board, denominations and everything. And I figured it would jump on up. But he found it was just about 3% across the board in his study and his research. And I didn't think that would be the case when some of your denominations and how they do things. But that's not much. That's not much. Okay, let's notice New Testament and giving. The New Testament giving. The New Testament does not give a specific amount or percentage. Nowhere in the Bible do you read about an example of less than 10%, other than maybe Ananias and Sapphira in Acts chapter 5. Let me help us to break down just how little 10% is. Let's do this. Next week, Levi commented on the spread that we have every week, and it's always nice to have that. But next week, I don't want you to bring anything, okay? I'm going to provide our meal next week. I'm going to bring one pizza for us to share. And I'm going to get it sliced into 10 slices. And I'm going to take 9 of those slices for myself. 90%. And I'm going to give you one slice to share, 10%. You see, we say usually 10% as in, oh, wow, that's so much. And really, it's not much at all when you look at it. Think about how inconsistent sometimes we can be if we talk about this tithe or this 10% that we read in the Old Testament. What if I were to get up here and preach a sermon about Abraham and what the Bible says about Abraham? And I were to get up here and say, yeah, I want to be a friend like Abraham. And you're like, yeah, I want to be a friend like Abraham. I want to be faithful like Abraham. You say, yes, I want to be faithful like Abraham. I want to be a man of God like Abraham. Preach on, preacher. I want to be a man like Abraham. I want to give the way Abraham gave. Shut your mouth. That's Old Testament. You can't preach Old Testament here in the New Testament church. We're a little inconsistent, aren't we? We better be careful with that. We're to give cheerfully on the first day of the week. 2 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 7. So let each one of you give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity. For God, circle that word loves. God loves a cheerful giver. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 1 and 2. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given orders to the churches of Galatia, so you must do also. On the first day of the week, let each one of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper, that there be no collections when I come. Purpose, we've thought about it, and we've determined what we will give. And as you know, a generous offering does not always mean a purposed or a cheerful offering. In Mark chapter 12 and verse 41, Jesus was sitting opposite the treasury, and he saw that people who were rich, they were putting in much, but it wasn't in a cheerful way. One of the things that has really impacted my life, in 2011, I went with Uncle LT up to Calais in Myanmar. You've been to Calais, haven't you? And so you get to Burma, but then you go up to Calais on the border of India and China, and there's just nothing up there other than a lot of people who love the Lord. And so much so, they know you're not there to sightsee as a tourist. They know you've not come for that, and you're not allowed to travel more than about 4 miles away from the airport. They keep a strong hold on you up there. Very poor people. You know, it talks about sometimes in the Bible killing the fatted calf. They did that for us. We showed up that first day. We had classes from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m., and the reason they didn't go later is because the government, the officials, the police officers made them stop. And even Tin Lin, the guy who's already passed on to his reward, said there were informants, LT, last year, and I found out about it. I had to kind of pay them off when you were here last year. So, they're checking in on you. But we got there that first day. They didn't have a fatted calf, but they had a fatted pig. And 2 or 3 days later, they're out there hitting that thing over the head with an axe. And we ate good that day. They killed that pig for us, and we was good eating. But you know what? When we left, in a very poor area, they made a contribution to me and LT in an envelope. That's how you do it when you're overseas. You put it in envelopes. And, obviously we don't take money from people. We try to pay for their seminars. But they'd have it no other way but then make this financial contribution to us. And it, when converted to U.S. dollars, amounted to about $50 each in an extremely poor area of the world. They were cheerful. They were happy to give. All right, we are to give to God first, not after everything else has been paid or purchased. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. With a willing mind to give everything. Doesn't say that we have to give everything, but a willing mind to give it all. Mark chapter 12, verses 41 through 44. Those rich people were putting in much, but this one poor widow, she threw it all in. She gave it all. In Luke chapter 18 and verse 22, Levi was talking about this man earlier. You still lack one thing. Sell all that you have and distribute to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. You know, I often wonder about the rich young ruler. If he would have done what Jesus said to do and gave it all, how much more would the Lord have blessed him on the other side? You ever thought about that? How much more would the Lord said, okay, you've proven yourself, and now let me show you what I'm going to give you so you can keep proving yourself. But he didn't. He went away sorrowful. Acts chapter 4, verses 32 through 37, the first church, along with Acts 2 in Jerusalem, they're selling their land. They're selling their possessions. In my lifetime, we've never had to do that here in the United States, maybe in yours, but in mine, we haven't. I think people in this room would do it if it called for it, if it came down to it. But the Lord has blessed us richly. With the right attitude, 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 1, moreover, brethren, we made known to you the grace of God bestowed upon the church of Macedonia, that in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded in the riches of their liberality. For I bear witness that according to their ability, yes, and beyond their ability, they were freely willing. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 9. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is often misunderstood. That short chapter about love and those, 13 verses, it's often misunderstood because everybody focuses on that one little section in the middle, verses 4 through 8. And they miss verses 1, 2, 3, and they miss the entire point of the chapter and of the book. Paul said, and though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Paul's saying, look, you can give everything you own away. You can give it all. You can give your life. But if you're not doing it for the right attitude, the right motivation, you're not doing it out of love, it means nothing. We're to be faithful in our giving. 1 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 2, moreover, it is required in stewards that one be found faithful. Luke chapter 16 and verse 10, he who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much, and he who is unjust in what is least is also unjust in much. Again, we need to teach our children the importance of money and giving. I assume this has not changed, but the top two reasons for however long now for divorce, the top two reasons given is usually or has been sexual problems and financial problems. Top two reasons given. Well, we can easily remedy that, and we should. Blessings of giving. God does not bless the selfish. This is after the captivity, but they started, if you couple these books that Roy's been teaching us, if we put these books where they are supposed to be chronologically, along with Ezra and Nehemiah, they started on rebuilding the temple, but they got discouraged and they quit. And Haggai, that goes along with those books, chapter 1, verse 3, the word of the Lord came to Haggai the prophet saying, notice what he's saying, is it time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses, and this temple to lie in ruins? Now, therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. You have sown much and bring in little. You eat, but you do not have enough. You drink, but you are not filled with drink. You clothe yourselves, but no one is warm. And he who earns wages to put it into a bag with holes. Your priorities are not in order. God blesses a cheerful giver. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 9, honor the Lord with your possessions, with the first fruits of all your increase, so your barns will be filled with plenty. Chapter 11, verse 24, there is one who scatters, yet increases more. And there is one who withholds more than is right, but it leads to poverty. God will give to us as we give to him. Luke chapter 6 and verse 38, given it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. We don't do it to get a return. And let me say this. I know I've already went over a couple minutes. My apologies to Roy. We don't do it to get a return, but God will take care of us. And we need to notice all the different ways that God will take care of us. It might not be more money in my pocket, but it might be less money going out of my bank account. It might be that God's blessed. I have a friend, Sonny Sanders, member of the church, and he said, it seemed like every time I was getting ahead, I'd get some overtime or get a bonus. He said, something would happen. Refrigerator go out, car repairs, whatever. I was thinking, why is this happening to me? Then I realized, no. Every time there was a need, God had provided the money to take care of that need. And it might be this. It might be the amount that I currently possess that God's saying, Ricky Berger, you don't need any more because I know you can't handle it right now. And if I were to let you have more, that would be what would pull you away from me. Because a lot of people in the Bible, that was what pulled them away. So I also need to look at it from, it might be that this is where I am, this is where I need to be. I sometimes pray, God, if I'll be faithful with it, give me more to be faithful with it. But if not, God, keep it from me. Because as you can see in our conclusion, I don't want to go to hell because of it. You can't take money to heaven with you. So don't go to hell because of it. Just a couple other thoughts. Go down to what if I fail in my giving? What if I fail in my giving? Eternal punishment if not repented of and corrected. The one talented man. not using it the right way. Elders will not be able to depend on you when planning work. The disciples each according to his ability. Notice the underline, according to his ability. Your ability is going to be different than my ability. Also, I'd add currently. What you were able to do 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago might be different than today. And what you're able to do down the road might be different. But what you're able to do currently. And they sent this relief to the brethren in Judea. Mission efforts may be stopped. Philippians chapter 4, verse 15. Now you Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church shared with me concerning giving and receiving, but you only. For even in Thessalonica you sent aid once and again for my necessities. Not that I seek to give, but I seek the fruit that abounds. You know, I was so thankful. You know, we still do some mission work, but full time for 10 years. And I was thankful for churches that helped us to go and helped us even when we were there. When Ashley, Jude, and I got sick in Majuro, thankfully we were already on the plane when the real illness hit, so we were on our way to Hawaii and we were able to be sick there where there was a hospital rather than Majuro when there was no medical attention. But I don't know how many people from right here reached out to us to send us money and to help if we needed help. We had to stay there for 4 days not expecting that. There's a lady in this classroom right now tonight. She and another lady pay for our hotel rooms. During that time. So many people are so good to us. Wes Walker, they took a special contribution to help us to pay for our additional stay and medical bills. There were brethren there that Neil Myers worked with at the Pearl Harbor Church of Christ. They came and did our laundry for us and took us grocery shopping. And brethren are so good. Brethren are so good. And, if we're not giving the way we should, it could stop this. When I was raising mission support, an elder in the church told me, he said, if you'll notice in most all congregations, the mission budget gets the least amount, and it's also the first one cut when there's budget cuts. Now, that may or may not be true in your congregation, but think about it. It usually gets the least amount, and when there are budget cuts, it's the first one cut. In conclusion, may we never rob God. Malachi chapter 3 and verse 8. Will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. You're cursed with a curse, for you robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring all the tithes into the storehouses, that there may be food in my house. Circle this, and try me now in this. God's saying, try me, see. See what happens. Says the Lord of hosts, if you will not open your windows of heaven and pour, if I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you such blessings, that there will not be room enough to receive it. Can't go to heaven with it. You do not want to go to hell because of it. Look back over the last 5 years of your life. Notice all the ways that the Lord has blessed you. Then look at your giving record and ask, am I giving in the way that the Lord has blessed me? So thank you again. I know I went over. My apologies to you for that. Last week, some of you said you did not get the outline, Come Let Us Sing. If you didn't get it, I have extras. Thanks to Amy, she made extra copies. So if you need an extra copy, please let me know, and we'll have Danny. Would you lead our prayer, and then we'll have our break.